waste me with that gossip, saying sucker free from my shit. Let someone get out of the pocket. Whoa, he come from different walks of life, but relate to the same cause. Fighting to live the fight, laid up behind them hospital walls. They focus like a face, but like some bridges sharper than a knife. Take a cookie from the draw, grind it, wrap it in the raw. YBT will stay low, you know them it's a prop. Shout to my producers, King Jones, it's a hop. AR with the alley-oop, I do him up a lot. Far from corny nigga, I'm the hottest shot of cop. I had to boss up for a jet, move my fam up at Jets. Draft some key plays in the set, sauce of the blue cheese that ranch. I am a club member, you a guest. Speak of my name, better put respect. Step on the me, gotta come right. Fuck who got now, or who got up next? Yeah, AR the prophet, Charlie Black, a deadly combination. It's been long overdue, I know the streets been waiting. Which takes a lot of patience, cause you never rush break. This was for the record, but going down history in the making. AR the prophet, Charlie Black, a deadly combination. It's been long overdue, I know the streets been waiting. Which takes a lot of patience, cause you never rush break. This was for the record, but going down history in the making.
AR the prophet, Charlie Black, Black Prophet, that's a fact. Going down in history, and it's a fact. It's a deadly combo, niggas know that. Prophet, that's a fact. Black Prophet, on the bottom of the map. Atlanta, Georgia, Florida. We up in them waters, it's on, bruh. Black Prophet, that's a fact. Deadly combination, y'all got in that. They ain't ready for that shit, Charlie Black. Let's give it to him, bro. Welcome. Black.
Should we do a review of last time or no? Hello
everyone.
Good evening and welcome to Do I Look Sick, a show that's all about sickle cell awareness and education on sickle cell disease. This show, I am Mia, by the way.
And I'm Jennifer.
And we both have sickle cell. And today we're going to talk about the history of sickle cell, like the origination, where it come from, how did it come about. We're going to debunk some myths and some stereotypes. So y'all definitely want to listen in and probably take a few notes, and so that you'll go out into the public and you can correct someone about sickle cell disease when you hear these silly myths.
Well, that's a good intro.
Thank you. So, sickle cell has really been around for centuries. It's even believed that King Tut, all the way back in 1324 BC, died of sickle cell at 19 years old. There's really not much detail more than that. He was a product of incest, which they believed contributed to him having sickle cell disease. So that's an interesting fact, and just goes to show how far back sickle cell actually goes.
You know, what's interesting about that also is King Tut had, well, it was rumored, because I don't know because I never met him, but it was rumored that he had a club foot and he had issues walking, which I believe was probably due to avascular necrosis.
That sounds about right.
And, you know, he died early on. So the life expectancy probably back then wasn't as long as it has grown to be now in these years. And when you said about him being a product of incest, you know, back then they wanted to keep the royal bloodlines pure. So it's probably that either both of his parents had the disease or one had the trait or something to that effect. I do think that's an interesting story. I really wish there was more information available, like that we could research about that, because I think that's very interesting.
Right. And then, of course, back then they didn't have a name for it. It was just maybe bad blood, or maybe he was just a sickly, they called him a sickly kid. But to me, I think it's still interesting that he lived to be 19 with no diagnosis or any, I don't know how they treated it back then, or I don't know. I just think that still living to 19 back in that time with this disorder was still pretty good. And for him to be king, he must have done a few things right within his short lifetime. So I think that's pretty interesting.
Well, I read, since you said that there was no name for it, I read somewhere in our research when preparing for this show that since it has been around for so long, it has been known by many different names, but in different tribal languages. So I'm interested in to learn more about that, like what it may have been called before it was actually called sickle cell disease.
Right.
And I think about like how he lived to be the age that he lived to be, and I think about like, you know, it originating in that area of the world and like what they may have eaten, or, you know, how their diets may have affected how sickle cell progressed at those, you know, during those days and times.
I can agree with that. It was a lot different. So they didn't have the same effects or the same things as far as food that affect us now. They didn't have that then, and definitely didn't have that over where he was. So yeah. I can imagine the difference.
Because growing up, my mom found a book, I actually still have it, about cooking specifically for sickle cell, and a lot of the recipes in the book came from, you know, things like cassava and stuff like that we don't have, not like we don't have here, but that doesn't particularly grow here.
Right.
So I wonder sometimes if like eating the cassava or eating the fruits of the land and the vegetables of that land helped him live a longer life. But that's speculation on my part, because there is no data
that supports that. So, speaking of being over in the West African area, James Beale, who was born in 1835, was an Army medical officer in West Africa. And he documented incidents of recurring bone pain in some of his patients, which is pretty interesting. Again, that could be AVN. Well, that's joint pain. However, he also noted the correlation with cold weather, fever, and joint pain. And if you're not familiar with sickle cell, cold weather bothers us as well. The vessels tend to constrict and make it harder for the sickle cells to pass through the vessels. So that's where that cold weather pain comes from. But that's an interesting documentation that he noticed that in his patients and was able to notate that and find that correlation.
And then what's even more interesting is that, so he was born in 1835, like we said, but then it wasn't until years and years later in 1910 where James Herrick and Ernest Irons were able to use a microscope and observe the cells being sickle-shaped.
Right, and they observed the blood of Walter Clement Noel, which is, I think he was a dental student.
Yeah, he was.
Okay, and they noticed the sickle cell shape, the sickled shape in the red blood cells. So, like Jennifer said, that was the first observation under a microscope that sickle cell was noted. So that's interesting. We can see a little bit of progress, but it was still,
slow progress.
Yes, slow progress, but it's still there. It's still coming out. Even in the 1940s and 50s, the nature of the disease became clear. In 1949, 2 articles appeared independent of each other, and it showed conclusive evidence that sickle cell disease was inherited. So that means, You have to get it from both parents. You're born with it. You don't catch it. We'll get into the myths and the stereotypes in a little bit. We'll go more into detail about that later. But one of the articles that was published by Dr. James Neal, who was the chairman and founder of the Department of Human Genetics at the University of Michigan. His article was published in the widely read American Journal of Science, so he usually gets the credit for the discovery, even though people do cite the secondary and simultaneously published article by Colonel E.A. Beat, a military doctor in what is now Mozambique.
Yeah, at that time it was called something like Portuguese West Africa, or don't quote me on that, but it was, I guess, like a Portuguese area of Africa.
Okay.
So, but now it is Mozambique.
Okay.
So in 1951, even after the nature of the disease has started becoming clearer in the 40s and 50s, and the articles were published, it was then that it was deemed the first molecular disease, which is a disorder that results from proteins with abnormal chemical structures, which we think that was like the first one, but now today there are thousands of known molecular diseases.
True. So that's the history of sickle cell. So there's kind of a timeline from when we think, or when we can assume it was first noted back in 1324 BC with King Tut up until 1951. So like I said, it's progress, and it's still progress. We're 36 and 37, and we're still learning things about the disease. There's still research being done about the disease, and it's forever growing. It's still so much knowledge out there that is to be learned about this disease.
And I wonder, as we're talking about some of these doctors being in the military, I wonder if, I'm not in the military myself, but I wonder if the military has done their own independent studies, and, like we have all these different branches of the military, and if maybe they all have similar findings, and like maybe if there was a way to combine those findings to even be more educated about the disease and trait, the sickle cell trait, and how it affects soldiers and sailors in their missions and things like that.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I wouldn't even know how to go about suggesting that type of research be done.
Yeah, because they're all independent of each other, and they may not share information like that.
That's disappointing. However, so talking about the origination of sickle cell, how did it come about? Well, it is a genetic mutation as a defense against malaria in the malaria-ridden areas. Now, people with the trait do have a higher immune to malaria, but people with the disease can be affected just as those without the disease. I said that. So, yeah, it's like I said, it started out as a genetic mutation as a defense against malaria. So those people in those areas, they if they couldn't treat the malaria, of course, people died from it, whether they have sickle cell or not. But the trait, those with the trait were able to live a little bit longer or live easier and not be affected by malaria like other people would.
So like I like to say, we're the first X-Men.
Yes. The first mutants. And it originated in West Africa, where, of course, it has the highest prevalence of malaria. It is also present in lesser extent in India and the Mediterranean region. The DNA polymorphism of the beta S gene suggests that it arose from 5 separate mutations, 4 in Africa and 1 in India and the Middle East. So this is to show you where
it's not just a black disease.
Exactly. So don't think because you're Caucasian or you're Hispanic that you are
immune to
sickle cell disease, because sickle cell does not care what ethnicity you are.
Right. So that's just a little bit about the history, and it's something else that doesn't have anything to do with the history, but I just think it's just a cool little fact about the deer.
Yes, deer.
So deer have been known to have sickle cell. Like, I never knew that until researching a few years back. And then I was looking into some more history recently, you know, while we were getting ready for the show. And I was like, well, I wonder, do deer have pain? And if they do, like, how would we even know that they have pain?
That would be pretty interesting. And there's no research on any other animal having the disease. I don't even think it's called sickle cell in deer. It's called something
they
else.
just say that they have sickled shaped cells, but it also read that they don't suffer any ill effects from it, which, I mean, I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. I know scientists say it, but no one has physically asked a deer, like, are you in pain? So
I can't talk to Bambi, so.
Aw, Bambi.
We can't talk to Bambi and find out information, but that is an interesting little tidbit of information about animals with sickle cell disease. So we're going to talk about the myths, and I know for a fact that some of you have heard some crazy things. So I'm going to give you a number to call in and tell us what's the craziest myth or stereotype that you've heard while we go over some of the things that we've heard from just regular people to people
Medical professionals, friends, family, anyone.
Yes. So you can call us at 470-251-4647. That's 470-251-4647. And just call us and let us know the craziest thing that you've heard about sickle cell disease from whomever. And what was your reaction? Because sometimes our instant reaction is to give a side eye or probably want to curse them out for asking something that we consider
side eye.
So stupid. I think initially, I think a lot of us give that side eye or that look, and I can't control my facial expressions. No. So it's kind of hard to put myself back in that mind frame to educate. So,
but you have to do it. You have to do it to help dispel the myths. Like, I know it's frustrating, especially when you get them from medical professionals. Yeah. But you have to help dispel the myths, because you are not going to be the only sickle cell patient that somebody ends up coming in contact with, and you want to be like, okay, let me sit you down, take my hand, let's have a moment here, let's have a come to Jesus meeting about what you just said to me.
And this is why it was incorrect and why I'm looking at you kind of crazy. So one of the things that we've heard, and I hate to get this from the nurses or just from anybody, was, how long have you had it?
Oh,
that's the most annoying question ever, because, and it's, I don't know, I just hate that question, because of course if you know anything about sickle cell disease, it's inherited, like we said earlier. Right. You're born with it. So how long have you had it? I've had it for 36 years. I don't know how to say. I think
we're getting a call. Hold on a second. You're on the air with Sickle Cell Awareness 365.
Yes, I am calling all the way from Virginia. This is Nishita. Hi, guys.
Hello. Thank you for calling. So what's the craziest thing?
So one myth, and you already kind of touched on it, that it's a black thing, and that white people are exempt from getting sickle cell.
Yes.
So that's one thing that I've heard over and over and over again.
Yes. And like we said, it's not a black disease. It's a blood disease. So it doesn't matter what ethnicity you are.
Right. If you have blood, you could get it.
Right.
Yeah.
You can get it. So, yeah, I've heard that one too. And I'm constantly educating people that it's not just us. It's primarily in us, yes, but it's not only us. So, yes. And we have to take it upon ourselves to educate those who come to us with that information and correct them.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you work in the field that you work in. Tell everybody what you do.
Oh, so right now I'm working in sports medicine. I used to work in labor and delivery, and I know that sometimes when we would have patients come in without prenatal care, they would not want to do a sickle cell screen on white people.
Whoa.
Oh, we're going to talk about that in a second.
People of color.
Right.
Yeah, and so they would base it, when they would do that sickle cell screen, it would be for Black and Hispanics.
That's so crazy. And the fact that you said that leads us to something
Another myth.
Another myth, but I don't know if it's a myth or not, or if this is actually something that has happened.
This would be more of a stereotype.
Yeah. I was told by someone who works very closely with the sickle cell community, like back in the day when they were requiring infants to be tested for sickle cell, that they were testing all babies. And then some Caucasian babies were testing positive for sickle cell disease and sickle cell trait. And they stopped wanting to test because a doctor said to this person who told me this story, so this is like straight from this horse's mouth, was like, do you know how hard it is to sit down with a white family and tell them that their child has sickle cell?
That's scary.
That's crazy.
It's very crazy because now the kid is missing out on information or proper treatment because they're in denial about the disease. So thank you for calling and bringing that up. We're going to discuss that some more because we have plenty of stories about that.
And I wanted to say one more thing. You touched on, you were talking about the military doing studies. So I actually work with sports medicine doctors, and one of our doctors is doing research and study on sickle cell. And he was prior Army, but he works for the Army now. So there is research going on out there.
Good.
Behind the scenes.
Awesome. That's good to know. I'm glad to know that. I really am.
Yeah, I am too. Because I always wonder about that. Thank you for calling.
Okay, you all look beautiful, and I'm watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.
So, yeah, that goes into the story we were told about people in the military being tested and coming back, the test results showing sickle cell disease, and they were ashamed of it. They were ashamed of having it because they assumed it was just a black disease. And that leads into another conversation of racism with sickle cell, which we'll get into later. But it is really sad because you can't get proper treatment, and you can't, even if they mate with another white person, you can still get, your baby can still have the disease.
Right.
So they don't, it's like they don't, some of them don't want that information. The ones that are ashamed, they don't want that information. They don't want to be considered partially black or whatever the reason is. I was about to say,
and let's keep it real, racists have been mixing for a very long
time. So agreed. So it's really sad. I know white families, and I've seen Hispanic families that deal with, I know Hispanic families that deal with this. So
and recently I saw a pair, I think, of Israeli sisters who were saying that when they go to the hospital, I can't remember what the hemoglobinopathy that they have. It's not like SS or SC or beta thal. It's one that I hadn't recently heard of, that they are treated as though they are not really in pain. So they have to fight through that too. So that's, I mean...
Yeah, I really think they have another struggle when they go to the doctor about sickle cell. I think some of the doctors, and I've heard this from a white family, that some of the doctors look at them kind of crazy because they come in there and say they have sickle cell disease.
You're on the air with Sickle Cell Awareness 365.
Hello. My name is Amandre Smith. I don't know if this is like a question. I don't know if it's a question. Yeah, it's definitely a question.
Okay.
So I recently just met a patient with sickle cell, and he and his sister are both 41 years old. They just had a sickle cell crisis in their 41st year.
Wow.
Is that something that is seen predominantly throughout the sickle cell community? Is it something that is abnormal? Is it something that maybe a lot of black kids who didn't have or weren't afforded the opportunity to get a sickle cell test back then, should we go and maybe get tested now?
Definitely think everyone should be tested
again,
because some people have been misdiagnosed.
Yep.
Some people may have had pain all their lives, and then they're like, oh, you have arthritis, or you have fibromyalgia, or you have something that maybe mimics the pain of sickle cell, and they never had an actual blood test done for sickle cell. So I would encourage everyone to get tested.
Yeah, and I had a cousin who was diagnosed with the trait initially. but he didn't find out till he was in his 40s that he just had type SC sickle cell disease. So he's gone all his life not dealing with any symptoms, but he's also been active his whole life. So it's part of that could be he didn't really feel any symptoms because he stayed active, or maybe his eating or his diet was in a way that didn't harm him and add to the effects of sickle cell. So yeah, getting retested, and sickle cell affects everybody differently. So for them, if they've been keeping themselves up or in an environment where the complications have been minimal, then having the first crisis at 41 is awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. But I have heard of situations like that. So that's not like a new thing that I've heard, that some people have gone all their lives and like never had a crisis. Mm-hmm. So I usually kind of compare sickle cell to making chicken noodle soup. Like, we all make chicken noodle soup differently, based on like how you grew up, your family's recipes, or whatever. So your chicken noodle soup is not going to taste like mine. So the same way sickle cell affects me, it may not affect me the same way, or the people who you met, it may not affect them the same way.
Right. So that's
awesome.
That's very possible. Thank you for calling him, Andre.
Absolutely, and I'm so proud of you too. You look beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
And speaking on that, another myth is that sickle cell trait cannot turn into sickle cell disease. You can't grow into the disease. You can't grow out of the disease.
Got another caller.
Okay.
You're on the air with Sickle Cell Awareness 365.
Hi.
Hello.
I was trying to get on. How does that work?
Say that again.
I was calling to get on the air. How does that work?
How does what work?
Am I currently on the air?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know.
That's okay.
I couldn't hear at first. Okay, so here's one of the biggest myths that I would like to speak about as it pertains to sickle cell. Okay. Why do many people think that you cannot live a long life once you have sickle cell? I've had many people say to my kids or to me, "Oh, wow, they're still living."
Yeah,
Well,
I think it's because they put a life expectancy on us. But a healthier person could pass away quicker than me, you know?
Well, and I think also it has a lot to do with the fact that previously, you know, like before these days and age, there wasn't a lot of research being done on sickle cell, and people weren't living as long as they are now. And the life expectancy, like back in the 70s and the 60s and 50s, were shorter because people weren't having as good of care as we are now, and there wasn't a lot of research going on. So I know that I personally was told, not in the presence of my mother, but once in the hospital when she wasn't there, "Oh, well, you're not going to make it until you're 18 because, you know, people with sickle cell don't live long." So I have heard that, but it's really a matter of, I think, access to care has just gotten a lot better.
That's true. And they're still in that mindset of us not living.
So they have to
long.
catch up to like the strides that we're making.
Right. And we get that, honestly, too. Well, we get the conversation when we tell people we have sickle cell, and the first thing they say, "Oh, well, such and such died. I know such and such who died from this disease."
Like, don't tell me that, because we're just trying to live our lives.
Right. So
Right.
when you respond, you have to kind of, I know it's annoying because to put that out there, you have to kind of switch it up. And most of the time I'm like, well, I'm just out here living my best life. I'm just out here living my best life. So, I mean, I hate it for your cousin, brother, sister, whoever. However,
That's not my story.
I'm still here. I'm still breathing.
Right.
So, but yeah,
That's a horrible myth. I wish we could get that out of the air, out of the atmosphere altogether, because for children to hear that,
Yeah.
that's just too scary.
and
It's
we have
scary and it's
friends-
disappointing.
Right, and we have friends who are now in their 40s pushing, or in their 50s, who have anxiety when their
birthdays come around.
because they've been told you're not going to make it to 18, you're not going to make it to 30, you're not going to make it to 40, 50. So they've carried that, or they might have lived carelessly in their earlier years because they didn't think they would live this long. And now they have anxiety because it's like, okay, it's my turn next. Am I going to make it to the next birthday? So it's very damaging in the long run for people to hear that.
But my thing is just be the change that you want.
Point as well.
Yeah.
It's sad.
You just want to be the change that you wish to see in the community. So when I hear people say that, I'm like, well, I'm 37 and I'm not stopping anytime soon. So you see me and you see life.
Right.
And I speak life onto everyone that I run across.
Exactly.
So in order for us to dispel that myth, we just need to keep speaking life to the community.
Exactly.
Okay, well, thank you guys for taking my call. So far, the show has been awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, I hate that. And even if any of you have been told that, whether you have sickle cell or not, it's not up to the doctors. The doctors do not have the final say so. As long as your faith is where it is and whoever you believe in that. Don't necessarily believe that they don't know the day that you're going to leave here. So don't even absorb that into your mind, into your subconscious, because
just speak life over yourself, speak life over your friends, your family, everyone, and live every day till its fullest. That's it. Period.
Exactly.
Period.
Another myth is that it skipped generations or it's passed down from our father.
I've never actually heard that until you told me that one before.
I
had
heard
never
that
heard
one before. And you have to get it from both parents. It's not skipping a generation. It doesn't care. I let the mama go without having the trait, so I'm going to give it to the grandchild. No, that's not how that works.
Look, really serious face. No.
That's not how that works. It doesn't decide. You have to get it from both parents. That's the only way to get it.
I really wish we had a graphic of a Punnett square, because my mom and I were talking about this last night while we were going over the myths and things like that. And she was asking, what was the percentage of me being born with sickle cell?
Right.
And I was like, well, you had AS and my dad had AS, so I'm the lucky 1/4 chance.
Right.
I was like, but for every child we have the same percentage. It's not like if you have 4 kids, only one of them, you know what I mean? Like each kid has the same percentage.
And we'll go more deep in detail about that when we do the show talking about sickle cell trait. We can break down the percentage and
we can show you a nice little Punnett square, because I'm a little bit nerdy.
Right. So yeah, it doesn't pass. It's not passed down from your father, and it doesn't skip a generation. So keep that in mind.
And here's another one that I've heard.
Okay.
That is an STD.
Yeah, so you can't get it by having sex with the person with sickle cell. You cannot get it from drinking.
It's not communicable.
Right. It's not like herpes. It's not like gonorrhea. It's none of those. Of course, your parents had to have sex for the child to have sickle cell disease.
Right.
However, it is not an STD. I would hate to hear that one. So that would probably get more than a side eye from me. I'm sorry.
Right. And that another one is that we can't fly or travel. So I know a lot of people who have sickle cell who are afraid to fly because they've been told that I fly everywhere. I just do, extra fluids. Right. I get up and walk around when I can. I wear my my sad little compression socks.
With anything with sickle cell disease, you just need preparation. So when we fly out, I know when I fly out, the day before, I go and get my fluids to make sure that I'm hydrated. I even make sure that I carry an empty water bottle through airport security so that I can fill my water bottle up when I get inside the airport. Depending on my pain level, I may take medication before I get on the
sometimes
plane.
I do pre-medicate.
Yeah, to me it just depends on how bad I'm already hurting. If I can thug it out a little bit, then I may not take anything. But
and it also, for me, depends on how long the flight is.
That's true too. So it just takes preparation. Don't let sickle cell limit you from anything that you want to do. You just need a plan in preparation to do the things that you want to do.
Because it
If
is
you wanna
also
travel,
a myth
go.
that we cannot live fulfilling lives. That is a myth.
Because we are living fulfilling lives at the moment. And we see doctors, we see lawyers, we see entertainers, we see it all. All these people with sickle cell just living their best life. Their best life with sickle cell. So, what's another one? It's not contagious. Oh, there was another one that I used to get. So I used to be a lot heavier than I am now. I was maybe like, at my most, it was 250 pounds. And even as a high school kid, I was heavy. And at camp, I would get the comments, oh, well, you must be healthy for a person dealing with sickle cell because you're not as skinny as the rest of them. And I honestly didn't know how to take that then.
I don't even know how to take it now.
Now that I'm older, it's like, just because I was a little big, a little chunky, doesn't mean I was healthier.
Right.
So, yes, I had less episodes when I was younger as a kid. However, me being a little chunky and, I'm healthier because I'm chunky, that it didn't make sense to me then. And it still doesn't make sense to me now. No. We come in all sizes,
shapes,
big, right? Big, little, tall. It doesn't matter. Like sickle cell doesn't care. So, what else did we have?
So we can talk about a few of the stereotypes that we get.
Yes.
Number one, the frequent flyer, drug seeker stereotype is one that we get
a lot.
I don't know if you've never heard the term frequent flyer. That's something that I've heard within the medical community, like, oh, you're frequently in the ER, so you're a frequent flyer. And you're here, your pain isn't real, so you're just really coming in here for drugs and to get high. Now, I don't know everybody in the world with sickle cell, but I know a lot of people with sickle cell, and I know that most of us would rather not take medication, period, ever, point blank, than to be like, who wants to go wait at an ER for hours with a bunch of sick people when you already have an immune system that's a little shaky,
right,
for 2 or 1 milligram of medication?
That
like,
doesn't do
who
anything.
does that? Who wants to be stuck a million times because our veins are
not
shot,
there, right,
just for some medication? Like, if I go to the hospital, you better believe that I am in serious pain.
Right. And by the time we actually admit to ourselves that we need to go to the hospital,
that's another story.
We've exhausted all of our options already. So to deal with the extra at the hospital it just makes it worse. And then I had this conversation earlier that even though we're getting these stereotypes in the hospital, we still have to keep a cool head and not go off like we really want to because we depend on them for help.
Right.
So sometimes our hands are tied because they are living off of this stereotype and we're in pain. I can't do what I really want to do. So,
and that's when you get that additional stereotype that we're argumentative patients, that we're, bombastic about how we react to the medical professionals who are taking care of us. And I know I'm a good patient. Like, even when I'm being mistreated, I'm like really level-headed. You have to really take me to the point where I'm like, I'm calling my mama, like that kind of deal, for me to like even want to fight for myself, because I'm depending upon you to take care of me.
Right.
So I'm always fearful that if I react in a negative way, I'm going to get even more negativity back. Right. And you have my life in your hands.
Right. And sometimes the staff can be spiteful.
Right. Exactly.
So we don't want to put ourselves in a situation that's going to make it worse. Unfortunately, we have to be the nice guy even when they're being ugly. However, we have to learn how to pick our battles. So it's I think that's a constant struggle that a lot of people,
of those scale things.
Yeah, like what do you do in that situation? And it's really hard to keep a cool head when you're getting thrown all of this mess from people who are supposed to help you. It's really discouraging.
And I don't want to like necessarily say that everyone's like that, because that's not the case either. That's stereotypical to say that, every time you go to the hospital, you're going to have a bad situation, you're going to have a bad experience. Because I've had some really great experiences at the hospital, like some really caring nurses.
Yeah.
And I've had nurses who have never ever had sickle cell patients before. Mm-hmm. And then I've had nurses who have had argumentative patients before. So sometimes you're like, you may have been their second sickle cell patient, and their first one, it was traumatic for them also.
Right.
So sometimes you have to think about like where they're coming from also, and trying to meet them in the middle and educate them along the way. Because I've had some really, really wonderful nurses who have done everything in their power to make me comfortable, take care of me, make sure that I didn't want for anything.
Right.
So, I always want to give my credit where it's due,
right,
and not be like, okay, well, everyone is all bad.
Right. And another stereotype is that maybe sometimes our pain is in our head. That's not the case. Our pain is very real. Even if I want to sit here and say, oh, I'm not really hurting. My legs don't hurt that bad. My back doesn't hurt that bad. Sickle cell is like, listen, it's knocking.
Excuse me. Hello,
right?
I'm
it
here.
wants some attention. So
Baby
it's
me,
not just in
coddle
our
me.
head. We can't think our pain away. We can't. Yes, I believe in prayer, but it takes more than prayer to receive a healing with sickle cell, or to receive some type of relief when in pain with sickle cell disease. So it's not something we're making up.
Yeah, like when you just said that you can't pray it away. And I know that like people who are deeply religious are like, just, pray and everything will be good and stuff. And I do believe that to an extent, like prayer calms your mind.
Yes.
It clears your mind. And it helps you focus on like your intentional breathing and
right,
those types of things. So I think it's helpful in that way.
Right. But the people, some of the people, I won't say all of them, but some of them don't understand that aspect of it.
Right. But when you don't understand, it is also because you don't understand the pain, because you aren't living it.
Exactly.
So, like, people have sometimes asked me like, what does it feel like? And that's always like a hard question for me to answer, because one, it's not always the same.
Exactly.
And two, sometimes it's like, it takes my breath away. How do you explain a pain that takes your breath away? Like, I had a child and I'd have like 10 more of those jokers. Like,
yeah.
Even though I didn't have like a natural birth.
For me, I would say, and I've told my mom this, for me, sometimes I can it feels like my blood cells are freezing and it's icicles flowing through my veins.
I can get that. I can dig it.
It feels like that sometimes, or sometimes it feels like maybe the heaviest thing that you can think of is just sitting on your legs or your arms or your back. Some people say that it feels like they've been being stabbed repeatedly. It's different for everybody, but pain is pain, and sickle cell pain is the worst. So
right. I mean, sometimes like I've been in pain sometimes where it hurt to put makeup on my face. Like, just the brush touching my skin was too much. Like, how do you really explain to somebody like what that feels like on the inside?
And when we go to the hospital and that pain scale, when I come to the hospital on a scale of
no longer exists.
Right, when the scale, they asked me, is it 1 to 10? I remember saying this to one of the nurses.
Like 100.
I was like, she said, is it on the scale of 1 to 10? It's a 20.
Right. I guess off the scale.
It doesn't even, right. It does not register. It just doesn't. So that's what it feels like by the time we get to the hospital. It's not even on the scale anymore, because a lot of us probably live on a higher than 5 pain scale every day.
Every day.
And we've adjusted to that.
Right.
That's just how we live. You can't we don't look sick. So you can't look at us unless you really know us. Like, our parents can look at us and tell that we're not feeling well, even if we're like, no, I'm good. They know.
I got called out today. On
They
the way
know.
here.
Mamas know.
And
Daddies
she ain't
probably
even my
know,
mama,
too.
Noby.
See, she knows. She's been around me for
Long
long enough
enough.
to know what pain looks like. So when you have those close people who can look at you, or people who are familiar with sickle cell patients who can look at you and tell that you're in pain. Even when I go to the conferences, that people will ask me, "You feeling okay?" I smile all the time, but sometimes they'll be like,
No, not
you
today,
ain't."
baby.
Go to your room.
Take
go
a
take
nap.
a nap for a minute. Go take your medicine, and we'll see you at dinner time or something. So we can't. Sometimes we can't hide it, and that's just what it is. And by the time it actually shows up on their face, it's horrible. For me, when I actually admit that I'm in pain, I'm for real.
I probably should have admitted it like a day ago, a week ago, or something
Right.
like that.
So it's just it's really scary. Sometimes my mom tells me I look pale when I'm not feeling well, and I notice I'm very irritable. I don't want to talk to nobody. I don't want to do nothing.
Irritability part.
Oh, and then if somebody, I can be annoyed off of the simplest thing. Why is the grass green? Why it's got to be green today? Why is the sky blue?
Why the sun in my eye?
So it just gets horrible when the pain hits. It's like everything just annoys you. So,
well, you know, we could talk about myths, stereotypes, and history all day long. But on a serious note, since our last show, we've lost one of our Facebook friends, blood brother, warrior brothers, and we wanted to take a moment to honor him.
Yes. So his name was Elijah Powell, and he was 25 years old. His dream was to go to Morehouse, and he accomplished that. We just talked about living your life to the fullest. Elijah went to Morehouse. He graduated from Morehouse. He became an Alpha man, joining the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, and he was able to accomplish great things in his 25 years. He went back to Chicago to advocate in the Chicago community with sickle cell disease. So I did not know Elijah personally, but I admired him. He is younger than me, but I admired his drive. I love people living beyond the limits that their circumstances put them in, or living,
setting their goals, setting their sights somewhere, and then going about and accomplishing those things.
Yeah, so take a look at this video, and I hope you guys like it. So please keep the Powell family in your prayers. They definitely need it right now. Also, we want to just keep the family of the Bryant family, as well as all those who were impacted by the helicopter crash yesterday morning. I just cannot imagine losing more than one person at a time in my family. It's just sad, but let's keep them in our prayers, keep positive vibes going to them, because they're definitely going to need it. So hope you guys come back on February 10th. We have a Valentine's special show where we'll get into dating and sex with sickle cell. So y'all don't want to miss that one. We'll see y'all later.
Guys.
Deadly combo. Deadly combo. Black Prophet. Charlie Black, AR the Prophet.
AR the Prophet, Charlie Black, the deadly combination. Hold up, I don't think they heard me. I said, AR the Prophet, Charlie Black, the deadly combination. Hey yo, turn me up a little. We good. AR the Prophet, Charlie Black, the deadly combination. It's been long overdue, I know the streets been waiting. This takes a lot of patience, cause you never rush straight. This was for the record, but going down history in the making. AR the Prophet, Charlie Black, the deadly combination. It's been long overdue, I know the streets been waiting. Which takes a lot of patience, cause you never rush straight. This was for the record, but going down history in the making. First it was Elijah Muhammad, now we the honorable Black Prophet. We been in our bag and out of our feelings, securing all the profit. Ain't going outside, don't know what you hearing, so miss me with that gossip. Staying sucker free from option, let someone get out of the pocket. Whoa, we come from different walks of life, but relate to the same cause. Fighting live fight, laid up behind them hospital walls. They focus like a face, but like syringes sharper than a knife. Taking cookie from the jaw, grinding rapid in the raw. Bobby T was stayed, oh you know them it's a prop. Shout to my producers, King Jones, it's a hop. AR with the alley-oop, I do him up a lot. Far from corny nigga, I'm the hottest side of cop. I had to boss up for a chat, move my fam up out the jets. Dress some key players in the set, sauce of the blue cheese that ranch. I am a club member, you a guest. Speak of my name, better put respect. Step up to me, got a couple right. Fuck who got now, oh who got up next? Yeah. AR the Prophet, Charlie Black, a deadly combination. It's been long overdue, I know the streets been waiting. Which takes a lot of patience, cause you never rush straight. This was for the record, but going down history in the making. AR the Prophet, Charlie Black, a deadly combination. It's been long overdue, I know the streets been waiting. Which takes a lot of patience, cause you never rush straight. This was for the record, but going down history in the making.
AR the Prophet, Charlie Black. Black Prophet, that's a fact. Going down in history, and it's a fact. It's a deadly combo, niggas know that.